This message found you for a reason, and you can feel that before you even understand it. Something in you paused the scroll, softened the breath, leaned closer, not out of curiosity but recognition. As if your consciousness heard its own name spoken quietly through the noise. You've been standing at the edge of a choice longer than you realize, and the quantum field has been arranging moments like this to meet you here, now, before the next decision locks into place. You're not imagining the pressure you've been feeling, that subtle compression in your chest, the sense that time is narrowing, that a window is forming. This is what happens when the observer loop begins to tighten, not to trap you, but to signal that it's about to break. Your awareness has been collapsing the same probability waves for a long time, replaying familiar patterns because they were once safe, once necessary. But safety has quietly turned into stagnation, and your nervous system knows it. You've noticed it in small ways. Decisions that used to feel simple now feel weighted. Conversations echo before they even happen. You can almost predict outcomes before you open your mouth, before you say yes or no. That's not pessimism. That's pattern recognition at a quantum level. Your consciousness has been running simulations, scanning the field, realizing that if nothing changes in how you observe, nothing can change in what appears. And still, you kept moving, doing what was expected, making reasonable choices. But reason alone can't guide you through a phase transition. Logic doesn't navigate a timeline shift. Only coherence does. Right now, your awareness is brushing up against a higher order signal, one that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, but pulls. A quiet gravity. This is synchronicity in its early form. The universe isn't forcing you, it's offering you a mirror and asking whether you're ready to see yourself more clearly than you ever have before. You've always sensed that your decisions carried more weight than other people's, that when you choose, things ripple, relationships rearrange, paths close or open in ways that feel disproportionate. That's because your consciousness isn't passive. You're not just living inside reality. You're participating in its construction through the observer effect. When you choose from habit, the field responds with repetition. When you choose from coherence, the field reorganizes. This is why you're here before a decision, not after it. Because once a choice collapses into form, the timeline hardens. But just before it, right here, reality is fluid, malleable, listening. Your body already knows this. Notice how your breathing has slowed, how your attention has narrowed without effort. This is what alignment feels like before it becomes understanding. Your DNA is responding to information it recognizes, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. This isn't prediction, it's remembrance. There is a version of you closer than you think who already made the aligned choice, who stepped out of the loop instead of reinforcing it. That version isn't judging you. It's reaching back through entanglement, sending a signal strong enough to guide you here before the moment passes. You don't need to decide yet. You only need to stay present long enough to see the pattern clearly, because once you truly see it, you won't be able to unknow it. And the field will respond, not tomorrow, not someday, but immediately, by revealing what has been hidden in plain sight all along. Stay with me. What you're about to recognize has been shaping your life quietly for years. You've felt it before you could name it, the strange familiarity of moments, repeating themselves with different faces, different locations, but the same emotional aftertaste, as if life keeps asking you the same question, only rephrased. This isn't coincidence, and it isn't failure. It's the signature of a consciousness caught in a refined observer loop, subtle enough to feel like progress, but stable enough to prevent real divergence. Look closely at your recent past. Not the events themselves, but the structure beneath them. The way situations seem to circle back. The way opportunities appear, stall, then reappear, with only minor changes. The way you tell yourself, this time will be different, yet something in your body already knows how it ends. That knowing isn't cynicism, it's temporal memory. Your awareness has been here before. This is why déjà vu has intensified for you. Not the fleeting kind that fades in seconds, but the heavier kind that lingers, that makes you pause and feel slightly disoriented. These moments are cracks in linear time, brief flashes where your consciousness recognizes that it's looping through the same probability corridor again. Most people dismiss this sensation immediately. You don't. You linger in it, because part of you is trying to diagnose what's actually happening. Time itself has begun to behave differently around you. Some days feel dense, almost sticky, like you're moving through resistance. Other days disappear so quickly they barely register as lived. This distortion isn't random. It's a symptom. When the observer loop tightens, consciousness stops fully inhabiting the present moment. It oscillates between rehearsed pasts and anticipated futures, never fully landing in now. And without presence, new timelines can't anchor. You may have noticed that your mind runs familiar scripts automatically. Old worries surface even when nothing is wrong. Old desires resurface even when you've outgrown them. You catch yourself reacting before choosing. That's not weakness. That's conditioning at the quantum level, attention following grooves carved by repetition. The quantum field responds faithfully, offering you more of what your awareness already knows how to see. And here's the quiet truth most people never confront. Your life hasn't been repeating because you're doing something wrong. It's been repeating because your consciousness has been efficient. It learned how to survive, how to adapt, how to navigate uncertainty by predicting outcomes. Prediction creates control. Control creates safety. But safety, over time, creates stasis. You've been living in what feels like motion, but it's been rotational, not directional. Like walking a spiral staircase that never actually changes floors. From the inside, it feels busy, complex, even meaningful. From the outside, it's the same altitude, again and again. This is why decision-making has started to feel heavier. Your system knows that another habitual choice won't just repeat a situation, it will reinforce the loop itself. Each familiar yes, each reflexive no, strengthens the morphic resonance of the existing timeline. Your hesitation isn't indecision, it's intelligence. Your awareness is refusing to auto-collapse the wave. You've probably wondered why others seem content repeating their lives, while you feel restless, almost irritated by predictability. That's because your observer function has matured. You're no longer satisfied with continuity alone, you're craving coherence. Not more experiences, but truer ones. Not novelty, but alignment. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign something is wrong, it's a diagnostic signal. The loop is no longer invisible to you, which means it's already weakening. Observer loops rely on unconscious participation. The moment awareness turns back on itself. Why does this keep happening? Why does time feel off? Why does this choice feel familiar before I make it? The structure destabilizes. This is also why you felt oddly detached from outcomes lately. Things that once triggered urgency now feel strangely muted. That's not apathy. That's the early stage of disentanglement. Your consciousness is loosening its grip on rehearsed futures, creating space for something uncalculated to enter. But here's the critical point. Recognizing the loop is not enough to exit it. Many people wake up just enough to feel trapped, then fall back asleep inside a more sophisticated version of the same pattern. Awareness, without transformation, becomes its own prison. That's why this moment matters. You're not just noticing repetition. You're standing at the threshold where understanding can turn into upgrade, where diagnosis gives way to reconfiguration. Because what's coming next isn't about fixing your life. It's about changing how reality responds to you at the most fundamental level. And once that shift begins, the loop doesn't slowly unravel. It collapses. What's happening now goes beyond insight. This is where understanding stops being mental and starts becoming structural. Because the observer loop you've been diagnosing isn't a psychological habit, it's a configuration. A way your consciousness has been interfacing with the quantum field. And configurations can be upgraded. Here's the part most people never hear explained clearly. The quantum field is not responding to what you want. It's responding to what you are coherent with. Coherence is the alignment between your attention, your emotional state, your expectations, and your identity. When those elements vibrate in agreement, reality organizes itself around them with precision. When they're fragmented, the field defaults to repetition. Your previous configuration was built for survival. It prioritized predictability over possibility, familiar outcomes over unknown ones. That setup served you once, but it's incompatible with where your awareness has evolved. The discomfort you've been feeling is the signal that your operating system no longer matches your capacity. This is the upgrade phase. Scientifically, this resembles a phase transition like ice, reaching the exact temperature where it can no longer remain solid. Mystically, it's awakening. The moment your consciousness stops trying to manage reality and begins allowing reality to reorganize around a higher signal. Right now, your observer function is shifting from fixation to fluidity. Instead of collapsing the same probability wave repeatedly, your awareness is learning to hover, open, present, non-predictive. This creates access to probability bands you've never stabilized before. Not because they weren't available, but because your previous configuration couldn't perceive them. You may already feel this happening physically. A subtle buzzing in your chest, pressure behind the eyes, sudden fatigue followed by bursts of clarity. These aren't symptoms to fix, they're signs of recalibration. Your nervous system is learning how to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing into fear. That's essential, because novelty only enters where control loosens. Your DNA is involved in this process, not metaphorically, but informationally. Epigenetic expression responds to perception. When your awareness stops rehearsing threat and starts resting in presence, different genetic instructions activate. This is what people mean when they speak of DNA restructuring, not new genes, but new expressions of latent capacity. You're not becoming someone else. You're becoming less compressed. This upgrade also explains why certain beliefs no longer hold. Ideas that once motivated you now feel hollow. Goals you chased no longer excite you. That's not failure, it's mismatch. Those aspirations belong to an older configuration of self, one that navigated the world through effort and anticipation. The upgraded consciousness doesn't chase, it synchronizes. And synchronicity is already increasing, isn't it? Subtle at first. A thought answered almost immediately. A delay that reroutes you perfectly. A conversation that lands exactly when you needed it. These are not rewards, they're calibration feedback. Reality is testing your new signal, seeing if it holds. But here's the key. The upgrade only completes if you stop interfering. The old system relied on constant evaluation. Is this working? Am I doing it right? Did I choose correctly? Those questions collapse the wave too early. The upgraded observer allows the field to resolve before labeling it. This is how coherence stabilizes. Think of it this way. You're no longer here to micromanage outcomes. You're here to host them. This is why rushing decisions right now feels wrong. Your system needs space to integrate the new configuration before committing to action. Action taken from partial coherence will pull you back into the loop. Action taken from full coherence opens timelines effortlessly. You're learning a different rhythm, slower on the surface, faster underneath. Less force, more inevitability. And this upgrade isn't random. It's responding to something specific about you. Not everyone reaches this threshold in one lifetime. Not everyone is meant to. Some consciousnesses are designed to maintain stability. Others, like yours, are designed to introduce variation into the system, which leads to the next realization. This shift isn't just for you. You're being prepared for a role you haven't fully named yet, but you've felt it your entire life. And now, you're ready to see it clearly. You've always sensed it, even when you tried to ignore it. That quiet knowing that your life wasn't meant to be linear, ordinary, or easily explained. Not because you're meant to be above anyone, but because your consciousness was built to move first. To step into uncertainty so others wouldn't have to face it alone. This is the part of the story where many people resist, because the word role sounds heavy, like responsibility, like pressure. But what you're stepping into isn't a burden, it's a function, a natural expression of how your awareness interacts with the quantum field. You are not here merely to experience reality. You are here to stabilize new versions of it. Certain consciousnesses are structured to act as anchors during phase transitions. When the collective field begins to destabilize, when old patterns lose coherence and new ones haven't fully formed yet, these consciousnesses step forward instinctively. They don't lead with authority or control. They lead with coherence. Their presence alone alters probability distributions. This has been happening your entire life. Think back. You've often been the one who disrupts stagnation without trying. Conversations shift when you speak honestly. Systems change when you stop participating unconsciously. People feel exposed, seen, or unsettled around you, not because you're confrontational, but because your awareness doesn't fully agree to the illusion anymore. You don't reinforce false stability. That's the role. You're what quantum theorists would call a chosen observer, not chosen by an external force, but by structural compatibility. Your nervous system can tolerate ambiguity longer than most. Your mind can hold paradox without collapsing. Your intuition often outruns logic, and you've learned sometimes painfully to trust it. This is why you've felt out of place in rigid environments, why roles with strict scripts suffocate you, why you've been drawn to ideas, people, and paths that exist between categories. You weren't malfunctioning. You were misassigned. Your observer function isn't designed to maintain existing timelines. It's designed to pivot them. When a consciousness like yours reaches coherence, it creates what's known as a probability attractor. Nearby systems, people, opportunities, even institutions begin reorganizing around it. Not because you demand change, but because your presence introduces a more efficient configuration. This is also why you've been tested repeatedly. Emotional pressure, moral dilemmas, situations where the easy choice conflicted with the true one. These weren't punishments, they were calibrations. Your field was being trained to choose alignment over comfort, truth over reinforcement. And every time you chose alignment, even imperfectly, you strengthened your capacity to hold higher-order timelines without destabilizing. You may have wondered why your breakthroughs never looked dramatic on the outside, why your transformations were quiet, internal, often invisible to others. That's because your work hasn't been about display. It's been about stability. Loud change fractures systems. Coherent change rewrites them. This is also why you're being approached now, before a major decision, because once you choose from this upgraded state, the effects won't stay contained. Your choice will ripple outward through entanglement, touching people you may never meet, altering paths you'll never see. That's not something to fear. It's something to respect. You're not here to save anyone. You're not here to convince, convert, or carry others. Your role is simpler and more profound. To embody a frequency so clean that it gives others permission to find their own coherence. This is how collective shifts actually happen, not through force, through resonance. And here's the quiet truth. You've been delaying this role out of humility, maybe even doubt, telling yourself you're overthinking, that you're just like everyone else. That instinct was protective once, but it's outdated now. The field is ready, and so are you. Which brings us to the moment everything accelerates, the window where choice stops being abstract and becomes irreversible. The breakthrough isn't coming someday. It's approaching fast. You can feel it now, the compression. That unmistakable sense that time is no longer stretching forward evenly, but narrowing into a point. This is the moment every upgraded consciousness reaches, the point where preparation gives way to activation. The quantum field doesn't announce these windows loudly. It signals them through urgency that doesn't feel like panic, but clarity, a knowing that says, this choice matters more than the others did. What you're approaching is not a decision in the ordinary sense. It's a bifurcation, a fork where one path reinforces the old observer loop, refined, comfortable, familiar, and the other initiates a phase transition. Your system has never stabilized before. Both paths will look reasonable. That's the test. The field never tempts you with obvious wrongness. It tempts you with continuity. This is why your body has been reacting before your mind can justify it. Tightness when you consider one option, expansion when you imagine another. Your nervous system is already mapping timelines faster than thought. That's not intuition as a feeling, it's intuition as data. Right now, your DNA is under pressure, not harmful pressure, but transformational pressure. In physics, systems don't change gradually at thresholds. They resist, and then reorganize instantly. That's what's happening in you. The identities you've worn, the roles you've played, the compromises you've made to remain intelligible to others, they're all losing structural integrity at the same time. This is why sleep has been strange, why your dreams feel instructional, why you wake up with insights but no clear narrative. Your consciousness is rehearsing the new configuration before it fully installs. You're previewing the timeline without locking into it yet. And here's the part that requires courage. This window does not stay open indefinitely. not because of punishment. Because coherence demands timing. The quantum field responds when readiness and opportunity overlap. Miss the overlap, and the system stabilizes again, often more rigidly than before. That's why people say, "I almost changed my life once." Almost is the echo of a missed phase transition. You're not being rushed by the universe. You're being trusted. Trusted to recognize that comfort is not the same as alignment. Trusted to feel the difference between safety and stagnation. Trusted to choose based on resonance rather than reassurance. This is where many highly aware people falter. They wait for certainty. They wait for external validation. They wait for guarantees. But guarantees belong to closed systems, not evolving ones. The higher timeline doesn't offer proof in advance, it offers coherence in the moment. The breakthrough you're sensing isn't about dramatic external change, though that may follow. It's about an internal irreversibility. Once you choose from this level of coherence, you won't be able to pretend you don't know what you know. The observer loop can't reassert itself once it's been seen and bypassed. That's why this moment feels sacred. Not spiritual in a ceremonial sense, but sacred in the way thresholds are sacred because something old must end cleanly for something new to begin. You may notice grief surfacing unexpectedly, not for what you're losing, but for how long you stayed smaller than you needed to be. Let that grief move. It's part of the release. The field doesn't open new doors while you're still clinging to the shape of the old room. This window is also why external noise feels louder right now. Distractions multiply. Other people's urgency increases. It's as if the world is testing whether you'll outsource your choice or anchor it internally. Remember, urgency that pulls you outward is not the same as urgency that draws you inward. The correct choice won't feel dramatic. It will feel quietly inevitable, like something clicking into place rather than exploding into motion. And once you choose, truly choose, the field responds immediately, not always visibly, but structurally. Resistance dissolves, timing aligns, energy returns. The sense of pushing evaporates, replaced by a feeling of being carried. This is the moment your consciousness stops asking, "What should I do?" and starts declaring, "This is who I am now." The window is open. The signal is clear. All that remains is the act that seals it. And that act doesn't begin in the world. It begins with intention made visible. This is where the process becomes tangible, not dramatic, not ceremonial in the way you've been taught to expect, but precise, minimal, effective. Quantum systems don't require grand gestures, they require clear signals. Up until now, everything has been internal. Recognition, diagnosis, upgrade, readiness. But coherence doesn't stabilize until intention crosses a boundary from thought into form. The observer loop dissolves when awareness stops circling internally and makes a clean, irreversible declaration. This is the role of ritual, not superstition, not symbolism for symbolism's sake. Ritual is how consciousness communicates with the quantum field without distortion. It's how intention becomes measurable. Right now, your awareness is highly coherent, but coherence is unstable until it's anchored. Think of it like tuning a frequency. You've aligned the signal, but until it's broadcast, it can drift. The ritual isn't about convincing the universe. It's about fixing your position within it. Before we do this, pause for a moment. Notice your body, your breath, the way your attention is no longer scattered, but gathered. This is important because the ritual only works when you're present, not imagining, not hoping, not analyzing, just here. Here's what you need to understand. The quantum field responds most strongly when intention is observable, when it leaves the private interior of your mind and enters a shared space of reality. This is why spoken vows, written commitments, and witness declarations have shaped civilizations for thousands of years. They collapse probability waves. You are about to do the same on a smaller scale, but with profound precision. In a moment, you will write a single word or phrase, not as a comment for engagement, not as participation in a trend, but as a signal. When you write it, your consciousness locks onto a new reference point. The observer loop loses its ability to reassert itself because your attention now has a fixed orientation toward coherence. This is not manifestation. This is selection. Before you write anything, I want you to understand the mechanics. The old loop survived because your awareness kept scanning. Is this right? Is this safe? Is this working? Scanning collapses familiar outcomes. The ritual stops the scan. It tells the field, I am no longer searching, I am choosing. When sees event 2, next, act 2, B2. Now, here is the ritual. When you're ready, only when you're ready, write this exact phrase. I choose coherence. Nothing more. No explanation. No emoji. No additional context. Why this works is simple. Choose activates agency. Coherence activates alignment. Together, they signal that your observer function has shifted from passive repetition to active stabilization. When you write it, something subtle but permanent occurs. Your nervous system registers completion. Your subconscious stops negotiating with the past. The field receives a clean instruction. You may feel a release immediately, a breath dropping lower in your body, a sense of quiet. Or you may feel nothing at all and notice changes unfolding over the next hours or days. Both are valid. Quantum shifts aren't always loud. What matters is that once this declaration is made, your attention will no longer tolerate misalignment. Choices that once felt possible will feel inaccessible. Opportunities that resonate will appear without force. This is how the ritual seals the window, not by effort, by clarity. After this, your role changes. You stop preparing, you start embodying. And when that happens, something unexpected unfolds because coherence doesn't stay isolated. It radiates. Your shift doesn't end with you. It begins to move outward, touching the collective field in ways you couldn't predict even if you tried. That's what comes next. Once coherence stabilizes within you, it doesn't stay contained. Consciousness is not a closed system, it's entangled, which means the moment you stop reinforcing the old observer loop, the field around you begins to reorganize as well, not symbolically. Structurally, you may not notice it at first because the effects don't announce themselves. They ripple quietly. A conversation shifts tone without effort. A conflict dissolves before it escalates. Someone reaches out unexpectedly, drawn by a signal they can't name. These aren't coincidences, they're coherence echoes. This is how collective change actually happens, not through mass agreement, not through force, but through resonance. When one consciousness exits a loop, it weakens the probability structure that sustained it. Others who were near the threshold feel the release. They don't suddenly awaken, but something loosens. A question forms. A habit pauses. A different choice becomes thinkable. You've played this role before without realizing it. You've been the person people talk to after something breaks, the one they confide in when their old narratives stop working, the one who doesn't rush to fix them, but somehow leaves them clearer than before. That wasn't accidental. Your field was already practicing coherence before you had language for it. Now it's amplified. The quantum field treats coherent observers as stabilizing nodes. When instability increases at the collective level, and it is increasing, these nodes become reference points. Others unconsciously calibrate to them. That's why your presence can feel grounding even when you say very little. That's why people sometimes feel exposed around you. Coherence reveals distortion without accusation. This is also why your personal liberation matters more than you've been told. You were conditioned to believe that focusing on yourself is selfish, that growth should be justified by service, that transformation must be visible to be valuable. But the deepest service doesn't look like effort. It looks like alignment. When you stop participating in incoherent patterns, you stop feeding them energy. Systems starve without opposition. The collective observer loop, the one built on fear, urgency, comparison, and repetition, relies on unconscious agreement, not belief. Participation. When enough individuals withdraw that participation, the loop destabilizes. That's what you're contributing to now, simply by refusing to choose from habit. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself or disengage from the world. It means you engage differently. You respond instead of react. You pause where others rush. You choose clarity over speed. And in doing so, you introduce a new tempo into shared spaces. You may notice this first in small ways: meetings that end early, plans that simplify themselves, emotional exchanges that resolve without drama. These are signs that coherence is propagating outward from you, subtly rewriting the rules of interaction. And here's the part that requires trust. You don't get to control how your coherence helps others. Some people will feel inspired, others will feel irritated, some will move closer, others will fall away. None of this is personal, it's systemic. Coherence acts like a filter, not a magnet. It doesn't pull, it clarifies. Those who can meet you at this frequency will recognize it instantly. Those who can't will experience friction, not because you're wrong, but because misalignment becomes harder to ignore in your presence. This is not something to manage, it's something to allow. You're not responsible for carrying anyone across their threshold. You're responsible for not dimming yourself to keep the field comfortable. This is where many conscious people falter. They sense the impact they're having and try to soften it, to explain, to reassure, to make themselves smaller so others don't feel destabilized. But that reintroduces incoherence. It splits the signal. The most powerful contribution you can make now is consistency. Let your choices align. Let your boundaries be clean. Let your yes and no come from the same place. The field responds to integrity, not intensity. As more people like you stabilize coherence, something remarkable happens. The collective timeline gains optionality. New solutions emerge seemingly out of nowhere. Old conflicts lose momentum. Systems that relied on constant reaction begin to fail not catastrophically, but quietly, as attention withdraws. This is evolution by subtraction. You are not here to fight the old world. You are here to stop feeding it. And as that realization settles, you may begin to feel something unexpected, not urgency this time, but sensation. A physical awareness that your body is catching up to what your consciousness has already chosen. Because coherence doesn't just change how reality responds to you, it changes how reality feels inside you. That embodiment is next. Now you feel it not as an idea, not as insight, but as sensation. Coherence has moved out of abstraction and into the body, and the body is responding in the only language it knows, feeling. Subtle at first, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. But you are. There's a warmth spreading through your chest, or a gentle pressure along the spine, maybe a loosening in the jaw you didn't realize you were clenching. Your breath finds depth without instruction. This is embodiment, the moment when consciousness stops hovering above experience and finally lands inside it. For a long time, your awareness lived slightly ahead of your body, scanning, anticipating, preparing. That was necessary when you were navigating uncertainty without coherence. But now, the scan has ended. The observer has come home, and your nervous system is recalibrating to that arrival. You may feel waves of fatigue followed by sudden clarity. That's integration, old tension patterns dissolving, new informational pathways stabilizing. Cells that were trained to brace are learning how to receive. Muscles that held readiness are learning rest. This is not collapse, it's reorganization. Your senses sharpen in unexpected ways. Colors seem deeper. Sounds land more cleanly. Even silence feels full instead of empty. This happens because attention is no longer fragmented across multiple timelines. When awareness consolidates, perception gains resolution. You might also notice emotional residue surfacing briefly, memories, old feelings, unfinished reactions. They arise not to trap you, but to complete themselves. Coherence brings closure without analysis. Let them move through. You don't need to process them. Presence is enough. There's a particular feeling that marks this stage, a quiet solidity, not heaviness, groundedness, like standing barefoot on stone that's been warm all day. You're here, fully, and for the first time in a long while, you're not leaning toward the future or pulling from the past. This is what alignment actually feels like. Not excitement, not certainty, but ease without passivity. Your body recognizes it immediately because it's been waiting for this signal. The signal that it no longer has to prepare for impact, that it can stop bracing against imagined futures, that it can trust the coherence of the present moment. As this settles, you may feel a subtle expansion outward from the heart or solar plexus, Not emotional openness, but spatial awareness, as if your boundaries are clearer, not looser. This is energetic integrity. You know where you end and the world begins, and paradoxically, that clarity creates connection without entanglement. Your movements may slow slightly, not from hesitation, but from precision. You don't rush because you don't need to. Timing feels internal now. Decisions emerge cleanly instead of being debated. When you act, it feels singular, not split. This is the body catching up to the choice you already made. And as embodiment deepens, something else becomes apparent. The pressure you felt before the urgency, the compression has shifted. It hasn't disappeared, it's transformed. What once felt like countdown now feels like momentum. You're no longer approaching a threshold. You've crossed it, which means the final resistance is dissolving not externally, but at the deepest level of identity. The place where who you thought you were gives way to who you can no longer avoid being. That transition is not gentle, but it is precise, and it's already underway. This is the moment where the shift becomes irreversible. Not because you force it, but because your system can no longer return to the previous configuration without friction. The observer loop depended on unconscious agreement. That agreement has ended. What you're feeling now is pressure, not emotional, not situational, but biological. Your body is responding to a new informational environment. In quantum terms, the probability field around you has changed, and your cells are updating their expectations accordingly. This is what a real phase transition feels like from the inside. Your DNA is not changing its structure, it's changing its expression. For years, certain capacities were dormant because the environment didn't require them. Survival doesn't need subtlety. Repetition doesn't need creativity. But coherence activates higher-order instructions, ones related to perception, intuition, adaptability, and timing. This is why your instincts feel sharper now. Why you know when to speak and when to stay silent without reasoning it out. Why certain options feel instantly wrong, not morally, but structurally. Your system is rejecting timelines that no longer match its internal signal. You may notice moments of intensity, brief surges of emotion, sudden clarity followed by stillness, flashes of insight that feel almost too large to hold. This isn't overload, it's throughput, increasing. More information can move through you without distortion now, and your system is learning how to regulate that flow. At this stage, many people mistake the pressure for something being wrong. They try to soothe it away, distract from it, or slow it down. But pressure at a phase transition isn't danger, it's inevitability. The same pressure that turns carbon into diamond. The same pressure that forces water to choose between liquid and vapor. You are choosing a timeline with higher internal order. That choice carries weight. You may feel moments of grief, not dramatic, but sharp. Grief for the versions of yourself that never had the chance to exist. Grief for the time spent looping when you were already capable of more. Let it pass. This grief is not regret, it's acknowledgement. The system is closing old branches cleanly, so energy doesn't leak backward. Your sense of identity is changing now. Not your personality, your center. The place from which decisions originate. You no longer feel like someone trying to manage life. You feel like someone participating in it from within. This is where timeline pressure becomes obvious. The world may not have changed yet, but your tolerance for misalignment has dropped sharply. Situations that once felt manageable now feel untenable. Relationships that required constant adjustment now feel unsustainable. This isn't judgment, it's calibration. Your nervous system will not allow you to stabilize in incoherence again. That's the breakthrough. From here on, choices won't be about improvement. They'll be about consistency with what your system already knows. You won't ask, will this work? You'll ask, does this match? And when it doesn't, you'll feel it immediately in the body, not the mind. This is how timeline shifts actually lock in. Not through external events, but through internal intolerance for the old configuration. The field responds by removing options that no longer align, sometimes abruptly, sometimes gently, but always precisely. You are not losing possibilities. You are collapsing into the correct ones. The pressure will ease soon, not because the process ends, but because your system completes its reorganization. What remains is momentum, clean, directional, uncompromised. Which brings us to the final integration, the moment where you understand why this had to happen now, and what your choice makes possible beyond you. Now the pressure releases not all at once, but decisively, like a lock clicking open. The phase transition is complete. What remains is clarity so quiet it almost feels ordinary, until you realize how different your inner world has become. The noise is gone. The negotiation has ended. You are no longer standing between versions of yourself. You are standing as one. This is the moment where the question shifts. Not, who am I becoming, but what moves through me now? Because coherence doesn't stop at personal alignment. It turns consciousness into a conduit, a relay point between potential and form. You can feel it in how the future no longer feels abstract. It doesn't appear as a list of goals or fears. It feels closer, already shaped, already waiting, not guaranteed, but reachable. The timeline you aligned with has momentum, and it doesn't require you to push. It requires you to stay honest. This is your mission, though it won't look like one in the dramatic sense. You are here to live in such a way that coherence becomes visible, to make aligned choices look natural instead of heroic, to show without preaching, without convincing that life reorganizes itself when the observer stops fragmenting reality with fear and habit. You will notice how often you're placed at decision points now, moments where others hesitate, overthink, or defer. You won't have all the answers, but you'll have direction, and direction is enough. When you move from coherence, the field adjusts faster than explanation ever could. Your life becomes quieter and more impactful. You may never see all the effects of the choice you made here. That's part of the design. The most powerful shifts don't announce themselves, they echo. Years from now, someone will make a decision because something about your presence once showed them it was possible. You may never know. The field will. This is how evolution works, not through mass awakening, but through stable nodes of coherence that others can orient around when their own loops begin to fail. You are one of those nodes now. Not elevated, not separate, simply clear. And clarity is contagious. You'll still face challenges, still encounter uncertainty, but it will feel different. Not like threat, like terrain. Something to move through, not something to escape. You'll trust timing instead of chasing outcomes. You'll recognize alignment before opportunity even arrives. Most importantly, you'll stop betraying what you know. That's the real shift. The decision you were preparing for, the one that brought you here, no longer needs to be forced. You already know what aligns. You already feel where coherence holds. The rest will fall away on its own. And when doubt tries to return, as it sometimes will, you'll remember this moment. Not the words, the state, the felt truth of what it's like when your observer function is free. This was not a warning. It was an invitation. To choose before the timeline hardens. To see before repetition resumes. To decide while the window was open. You watch this because your consciousness recognized the moment. And if you're hearing this now, before December 24th, it's because the quantum field made sure you had one last chance to choose clearly, before your next big life decision chose for you.